Chapter 3. According to what I have learned through all these years of preparation, growth, new knowledge, encounters, and experiences with extraplanetary societies, and according to what my own world makes apparent, I have reluctantly come to the conclusion that the human race is dying little by little, dying in hopes, dreams, ideals, love, confidence, perspective, and quality of life. Only very few are brave enough to venture on paths of hope and liberation. When I see young people hurrying to schools and universities, I wonder what world they will have when they graduate. When I see executives rushing around making important decisions or laborers working, I see a group of distressed creatures trying to secure their places in the struggle for survival. And when I try to communicate with them, I feel they are tense, wary, and afraid of what I may represent, either a companion or ally, or a menace or mortal enemy prepared to compete for everything. Human relationships occur solely out of necessity, forced by circumstances. Nowadays, people try to isolate themselves, distance themselves from other people, either physically or psychologically. You can be among friends and be very remote at the same time. Live in a big city and feel lonely. Have a great number of friends and be only a fake image of yourself, bearing a guise that never reveals the inner you, that never risks exposing the true ego, participating in a group only to enjoy the social advantages people may offer you, or simply to enjoy a companionship that will help you forget the heavy inner emptiness that you suffer. Similarly, and as easily as animals learn to defend themselves against predators, people build their camouflage. According to locale or circumstances, the masks vary. They may look strong, serious, secure, self-sufficient, intellectual, seducing, simple, delicate, mysterious, or powerful. Even happiness can be a parody, a performance where the audience is usually the actor himself. Unfortunately, centuries of evolution have led to a false and hypocritical existence where lies are the only truth. Hiding behind a totally different personality has become a habit, something normal. The philosophy of human survival has fixed the concept of individuality as something fundamental, and it has taught human beings not to expose themselves or their inner reality. They have been taught that if they do, they will be vulnerable to popular judgment, labeled, and consequently destroyed and replaced by their enemy, other men. And as losers and outsiders, they will have nothing left but a difficult new beginning. It is frightening to see the price we pay for civilization. On the one hand, we have more comfort, better health, and transport, but on the other hand, we pay a high price for it, the legitimacy of being our true selves. I wonder if anybody knows, in fact, what we are like and what we could be like. Of course, this picture has to change. We cannot develop substantially paying such a high price. The population of the Earth is growing, and we are proud to state that we have reached such a high level of technology that we will have no need of human physical labor in the near future. However, as we offer fewer jobs because of technological advances, the population increases. And what of those unemployed people? As their purchasing power falls, goods and services become unaffordable. We boast of having highly sophisticated medicine, but it is available to only an absurd minority because of its high cost. Specialized education becomes more and more expensive and more difficult for people to procure. There is less energy available and less space for circulation, but we insist on making more vehicles and buildings, more houses every month. It is obvious we are totally incoherent. For thousands of years, we have lived in the shadow of dogmatism and cultural alienation. However, as in tales of old, the tables were turned. Those who used to lead the process were contaminated by it, and today they are as alienated and dependent as the ones they dominate. The system has developed a simple but efficient strategy to stay operative, divide to conquer. We are all different and all enemies. Only the system can save. You can survive only through it. Without you, you are an outsider and will die. The time has come for a big transformation that will change the course of our history. It was through major alterations and radical changes that the course of the political, social, economic, technological, mystical, religious history of the world was changed. There's a totally different, wonderful form of life waiting to be disclosed, understood, and applied. But to attain it, we must realize that up to now, man has been blind, deaf, and turned in the opposite direction. He could not see or hear it because he pursued the wrong paradigms. I remember a nice little story that will help you understand what I mean. It helped me to understand this process very clearly and how things should be faced as they come up. Once upon a time, there were two little frogs that went out for a walk. Jumping along, they reached the stable of a beautiful farm where they saw a huge bucket. Full of curiosity to see what was inside, they jumped in. To their surprise and misfortune, they discovered it was half full of cream. They struggled desperately to get out lest they drown. 5, 10, 30 minutes. Finally, the bigger frog turned to the smaller one and said, "I can't stand it anymore." He was so tired of trying to jump out that he went down and drowned. The smaller frog was exhausted too, but somehow he went on struggling. However, his strength also petered out. He knew he could jump only 3 more times. Already panicked, he jumped once and it was awfully difficult. Then he jumped the second time and it was like dragging the whole bucket along. The exact moment he jumped for the third time, the cream turned into butter. Surprised and happy, the little frog stood on the yellow, solid surface and jumped to freedom, finally. Although he did not quite understand what had happened, the little frog of this story did his utmost to get out of the bucket. The first frog was not so lucky, but the second one succeeded, for he had time to wait for a major transformation in his environment, which meant salvation for him. However, not everybody in the world will be able to await the right moment, when striving reaches a favorable transmutation. Sudden, radical, surprising changes, unexpected, and apparently revolutionary, like the one experienced by the little frog in our story, are frequent in our world. They are important changes that alter the rules of the game of life in whatever field of human activity they may occur. And when the rules change, the world changes automatically. In these last 100 years, we have seen incredible changes. Norms, procedures, and rules are constantly turned upside down. We can easily highlight some of those important changes, such as people becoming concerned about pollution, ecology, and environmental protection. Black people and minorities fighting for their basic rights and having them secured by state and federal laws. Going from passenger airplanes to space buses. From the notion of inexhaustible oil supplies to the knowledge that there is not much left. From large, heavy cars averaging 3 kilometers per liter to small, light cars that average 12. From huge multi-million-dollar computers to equally powerful but affordable desktop computers. From likely death from an infarction to an artificial heart. From long-distance calls through wires to long-distance calls via satellite. From women's stay-at-home domesticity to women working outside the home at any job of their choosing. From the division of Germany to the falling of the Berlin Wall and Germany's reunification. From a socialist Soviet Union to a perestroika of market economy and the end of Soviet communism. From American leadership in the production of cars to leadership by the Japanese. If anyone had predicted these changes before they occurred, many would have said they were impossible. However, every one of them came true. And let's remember that in 1937, an American called Chester Carlson, who had nothing more than a certificate of Bachelor of Science, developed a device that he called electrophotography. One day, he went to see the manager of Kodak in the United States to show and sell his invention. He demonstrated how it worked. The scientist rubbed a cotton cloth against a zinc plate coated with sulfur in order to load it with static electricity. He wrote a few words in India ink on a microscope slide. Then the slide was placed against the zinc plate, and they were both exposed to the light of a reflector for a few seconds. The beams of light impressed the plate, except for the places covered with the words in ink. The plate was then sprayed with some black chemical powder called lycopodium, which was attracted only by the energized part of the plate, highlighting it. After that, Chester pressed the plate against a sheet of paraffin-coated paper. The words colored by the powder could be seen on it and were then fixed with heat. The manager looked at it, said it was interesting, and showed the scientist to the door. I don't have the slightest idea of what he might have said, but he definitely did not buy the invention. It was only around 1947 that Chester succeeded in launching the machine that revolutionized the reproduction industry. He had invented the Xerox, but at that time nobody saw any use for that strange type of photography. Today, nobody can live without it. What if man could recognize a great idea and its consequences? What if he could at least foresee the changes? It would make a great difference. He could take advantage of a situation, or at least have fewer frights and surprises, and could also possibly avoid much violence, hunger, misery, suffering, destruction, and death. The universe has given the human race the ability to think and choose, not with the intention of dominating the weak or submitting nature to their fancies, but to build a worthy way of life, where everything, human or otherwise, can live in harmony. But it will only be possible when man finds a way to recognize these opportunities for transformation, when he finds a system of apprenticeship that will rescue him and return him to a healthy road of development. Where did the secret lie? Where was man's main problem? Being able to foresee these special changes, identify the opportunities, and be prepared for them would be an incredible advantage, and it is possible, in fact. But to be able to foresee these kinds of special changes, to begin any process of comprehension of life, and to get back onto the road of development, it is necessary to understand the power and influence of paradigms. Paradigm is not an ordinary word, at least it is not used every day. The Greek root of the word means pattern. Another definition, which is the one that interests us, says that a paradigm is a group of rules and regulations that define limits. In other words, this is the function of a pattern, to define the limits, that is, the extremes. But it is important to understand the meaning of rules and regulations, for we will be constantly analyzing them. Paradigms strongly influence the way scientists see the world. I mean that solidly established rules and regulations act like filters and select the information that reaches the scientist's mind. The information in accordance with the scientist's paradigm has free access to an immediate, thorough acceptance. But the information that is not in accordance with the scientist's paradigm is accepted, if so, with great limitation or difficulty. In some cases, the scientists distort the information so that it will adapt to their paradigms instead of accepting the fact that it is an exception to their rules. In other cases, the scientists are literally unable to recognize the information, for that information is invisible according to their paradigm. Paradigms are values that, having been acquired all through life, constantly filter the contact we have with the world and the results of new experiences. We see the world through our paradigms all the time, but this does not mean that we can see all we want to and can create a new set of rules. No, in fact, we take some information that is valid in the real world and select from it that which can best adapt to our paradigms. So we interpret, distort some, ignore others. As a result, what is perfectly obvious in one paradigm can, in fact, be totally imperceptible to a person with another paradigm. Its implications are reflected in our daily actions. Every action, every habit, every behavior, every association of ideas is under the total influence of paradigms that we acquire throughout life. This is why we frequently cannot see important parts of our life or our future until it is too late. Everybody's life has rules and regulations, be they from a religion, military institution, business, football team, the way a soccer player kicks the ball, or the way mom cleans the house. We constantly deal with paradigms. And it is these previously established rules and regulations that prevent us from seeing life clearly, what we are, who we are related to, and from foreseeing the future successfully. So in the 60s, man looked ahead in time and came to the conclusion that oil would be cheap and available in abundance forever, that 4 children were an ideal number, that long hair, earrings, makeup, and hairdressers are for women, that women should stay at home, that abortion was a forbidden subject. How wrong all that was, and it is sad to see that for some it is still wrong due to the power of their paradigms. Paradigms alienate man so subtly yet powerfully that he is unable to recognize or identify when it is time to change attitudes. And it is not a recent situation. Stemming from the origins of our civilization and the beginning of our culture, changes have always occurred slowly, except when they were radically and abruptly imposed through wars. Thus, sadly, in the 21st century, we still have groups of humanity living in tribes with such primitive habits and customs. As I ponder, all the images I have of the world seem absurd. Paradigms have worked like a drug that anesthetized us to brutality, a blindfold that prevented sight, and a medicine that could be deadly if misused. Instead of helping to serve as a basis for understanding, they have become a weapon turned against us. We've dug a pit deeper and deeper, from which it becomes more and more difficult to escape. Since ancient times, institutionalized paradigms have been responsible for the chaos and divisions in our world. They have radically interfered in the progress of human knowledge. There are many examples to illustrate this statement, e.g., religions have sacrificed at the stake men who defied their doctrines. Through their discoveries and theories, these men questioned the simplistic information that attributed creation, as well as the manifestation of natural phenomena and their effects, to the gods. Some famous events seem ridiculous to us today, such as the prohibition of the study of physics by Pope Alexander III in 1163, or the decision of the French Parliament in 1380 to prohibit the study of chemistry, according to the decree by Pope John XIV. James Ussher, Archbishop of Armagh, Ireland in 1650, stated that creation had occurred in 4004 AC, and later in 1700, Dr. John Lightfoot, Master of St. Catherine's College in Cambridge, England, complimented the calculations and said that, based on the Ancient Testament, everything had occurred on the 23rd of October at 9:30 a.m. In the 18th century, based on some strange findings, scientists said that the Earth was 80,000 years old. And they continued, saying that man came from Adam and Eve, and that fossils that were found belonged to animals that had existed before the deluge. Not before 1871 was the theory of an evolutionary process accepted, and then not by all scientists. In the 19th century, when the steam engine was invented, the scientists of the time affirmed that the human body would never be able to stand any velocity greater than 80 kilometers per hour. At the beginning of the 20th century, the dream of making an object heavier than air fly was impossible. A journey to other planets was only in a madman's imagination. People at that time accepted all this as irrefutable truths and unbreakable laws. They lived and grew up under these paradigms, blind to any other reality. And how wrong they were. It is unbelievable that even nowadays there are people that are so attached to their paradigms that the most obvious things are absurd and unreal to them. For some, man has not reached the moon. They say that what we saw was a simulation staged by the Americans to cheat the world. For others, the Soviet perestroika is also a staging, with interests and objectives focused on a majority participation and representation in the European economic community. The division of the ex-Soviet Union into independent socialist countries could represent, after all, a dangerously superior number to the non-socialist countries. How absurd and how suspicious. Unfortunately, fear has become for all of us the worst paradigm. A paradigm that silently enslaves and dominates our life and numbs our senses more and more, day by day. If the world that surrounds us offers so many surprises that it is too difficult to step outside of conventions, what about the wonders hidden in the universe? The human beings are an unfailing source of surprises, with a countless number of fantastic potentialities that we still are unaware of. There is much to be explored in the paranormal field, but man's physical attributes are also as fantastic as those typical to superheroes in the comic strip adventures. It seems absurd to say we are as powerful as that, but it is easy to prove. After millions of people all over the world began to practice jogging, aerobics, gymnastics, etc., the physical paradigm became a typical one. There are various rules of exercises in this modality of sport, but how many would like to take part in a run of 100 kilometers? In our culture, the words 100 kilometers and running simply do not match up. Driving, yes, not running. But not for the Mexico City. Runs of 100 kilometers are usual among the Tarahumara Indians. They do it regularly, as part of a religious ritual. What is impossible to us is so easy for them, simply because running 100 kilometers is one of their paradigms. The longest competition of our culture, the 42 kilometers marathon, is a child's play to these Indians, not because of a genetic difference or anything of that kind. It is important to note that if any of us were born in that region, we would run exactly like them because we would have learned their paradigm of running. The American film Discovering the Future by Joel Barker can help better illustrate the action of paradigms. It all happened in the Vocational Center of Technology in an American university, where without much difficulty, a group of students broke one of the most interesting paradigms of automotive technology. In 1976, the students of the advanced course in fuel technology decided to build a very economical car. After a long period designing it, its features were: it weighed over 1,000 kilograms, over a ton. It attained 100 kilometers per hour in less than 10 seconds, and it averaged 27 kilometers per liter of gasoline, with an engine of only 16 horsepower. Well, anyone who understands a little about cars knows that it is impossible. You cannot make such a heavy vehicle attain that speed so quickly with an engine of only 16 horsepower. However, without much effort, that was exactly what the students did. How? The easiest way, using a different paradigm. Those students were not in the advanced course of automotive mechanics. Their course was advanced technology and fuels. They knew that if they used their own paradigms, they would be able to reuse the energy wasted by ordinary cars. In fact, this vehicle uses quite a simple project. When it slows down, it does not use normal brakes that generate heat and friction. Its rear wheels trigger a hydraulic pump that sends hydraulic fluid to a chamber, generating compression. This compression offers resistance, which lowers the car's speed. This vehicle does not use the engine to stop, consequently it does not use gear reduction. The engine triggers the hydraulic pump that sends more fluid under pressure to the storing chamber. Result: when this car begins to accelerate after a stop, the acceleration does not come from the small engine, but from all the energy stored in the chamber. This way you can accelerate even with the engine off, for there will still be pressure in the chamber. Therefore, the small gas engine only keeps the car speed steady, so it attains 27 kilometers per liter. As you can see, it was a very intelligent approach. But the question of paradigms is this: do you think the students who created this vehicle would even have imagined it if they were auto mechanics? I think the answer is no, because the paradigm of auto mechanics does not deal with storing energy, only with consuming it. I cannot and do not want to say that this car is perfect. It has a series of defects, but it shows how powerful paradigms can be. What is impossible with one paradigm can be performed easily with another. It is frightening to accept that paradigms can drastically influence our opinions and decisions, knowing that they can dangerously alter our perception. Even more so knowing that they can be acquired and induced. It seems clear that if we want to make a fair evaluation of our present life, understand the past, and make provisions for the future, we have to know the current paradigms that govern us and discover how they influence us. Only in this way can we see clearly what surrounds and awaits us. Therefore, we can see that paradigms are a double-edged sword. One edge cuts the information that suits them into very minute, precise details, but the other edge severs the information that does not suit the paradigm. You only see what your paradigm allows you to see, not the reality. It means that in some cases, you will see only a part or none of the information that does not suit your paradigm. In short, I can say, based on the work of Joel Barker, that paradigms are normal, for we have rules and regulations in many situations of our lives: professional, personal, familiar, spiritual, or social ones. Paradigms are useful and necessary. In fact, they tell us where our time is best spent, what is important to us, and what is not. They help us to solve problems, setting priorities of importance and the course to follow for their solution. On the other hand, they can cause serious difficulties, preventing us from having a clear appreciation of new ideas. But be careful. Sometimes your paradigm can become the paradigm, which means the only way to do something. When you then come across an alternative idea, you reject it instantly, which can lead to a noxious attitude. We call it paradigm paralysis. It is the fatal illness of certainty. It is easy to catch and very dangerous, for it will be extremely difficult to cure. Many people and institutions that caught it were eventually destroyed, for they never imagined that they might be totally wrong. Pessimists, defeatists, or owners of rigid paradigms who do not believe that something can be done must get out of the way of the ones who are doing something. People who create new paradigms, the ones who always propose new ways, who take daring tracks and are ahead of their time, tend to be considered strangers. They can be young or old, their age is irrelevant. The keynote here is that they do not subscribe to the established community of paradigms. As they do not invest in the old paradigms, they lose nothing by creating new ones. If you want to be able to discover new paradigms in the present time, you must look beyond the center where paradigms usually are. You must look at the extremes. It is at the extremes of conventions and systems that transformations occur. The adepts of old paradigms who choose to accept the new ones at the beginning of their development must be very brave. There is no concrete evidence to prove the validity of new paradigms, for they are unique. If you accept a new paradigm at its initial stage, you must do it against the evidence created by the previous solution. So you must believe that the new paradigm will succeed with many current problems, the only knowledge being that the old paradigms did not succeed in a few. Such a decision can only be made through faith. These take great professional and existential risks when they shift from one paradigm to a totally different one. If the new paradigm fails, as sometimes happens, they lose all credibility. Anyone can choose to change their paradigms. Human beings are not genetically conditioned to only one way of doing things. They can choose to ignore a group of rules and adopt others anytime they feel like getting rid of old ones. My very dear friend Sylvia from Rio de Janeiro quotes a saying attributed to the great industrialist Henry Ford. Our best successes were due to the fact that we let the madmen insist on what the wise men had abandoned. This reminds me of another good example, also by Joel Barker, to prepare the way for the rest of your reading. What follows in this book may be the breakdown of all your paradigms, so it is my responsibility to offer a new, different way of looking at the world. Here's the story. There was a young man in a very fast car who liked driving in the mountains of California where roads had only 2 lanes. They were narrow with a lot of dangerous curves, but he was a good driver and could cope with them. One day he was driving on his favorite road approaching his favorite bend when he encountered a car out of control coming at him. He swerved and managed to miss the other car by a hair's breadth. A beautiful woman shouted through the open window, "Ass!" He was terror-stricken and shouted back, "Ass!" and thought to himself, "How dare she? I was in the right lane. She was in the wrong one." Feeling vindicated by shouting back at her before she drove away, he sped up his car, drove round a sharp bend, and ran down an ass. This is a typical story of a paradigm. The young man reacted with an old group of rules. She called me names, so I'll call her names too. But in fact, she was just trying to warn him. Likewise, I have observed people during those long years when I was traveling around the world with a new vision of life, people who have heard ass on the roads and sharp curves of life. Obviously, they do not realize that their paradigms prevent them from taking a new track to happiness and accomplishment. A wonderful road is waiting for those who want to take it. There are alternative ways and opportunities always available to those who are alert. We are not alone in the universe, abandoned to our fate. There are others who, like us, tried to find the real meaning to life and succeeded. Today, they want to share it with other people who are willing to live a full life and remove the veils that blinded their eyes, and who will gradually substitute the rules that govern the cosmos for their old paradigms. Dear readers, the paradigms we all carry inside us prevent us and always will prevent us from recognizing the opportunities for real progress in life. Widen your mind, free your spirit, and open your heart to these words. We have already come a long way in a history that seems endless, but still have not gained much capacity of comprehension. We cannot continue in this retrograde mentality, nor can we go on thinking that only science or total spirituality are the routes to salvation and progress. We are no longer the center of the universe, nor are we God's favorite people. We are neither special nor unique, just creatures on their way to maturity, facing the risks of transition. Our generation has been given the task of changing, the task of forging unprecedented changes, of escaping the paralysis of paradigms. After 2,000 years, the time has come for another revolution, a mental, spiritual, cultural revolution towards intelligent realization. A new future will come. After the storm of a world in chaos as a consequence of ignorance, a new dawn will find those who knew how to be flexible against the fury of the wind, like a firmly rooted tree that has humbly bent to the violence of the elements, but stands again with the purpose of constructive evolution. Otherwise, those who remained rigid against the wind of truth and reason, stiff to the tempest that cleanse and purifies, or unbending with arrogance, will be uprooted, given no more chances to grow, for then it would be too late. As long as there are pure hearts and alert minds, there will be hope.